What kind of woman hears, "If you can bake biscuits, you can stay," and ends up holding the future of an entire ranch in her hands? Flames roared through the barn as a horse burst from the smoke without its rider. The sharp crack of burning timber echoed across the frozen yard. Ada grabbed a soaking wet blanket and ran straight toward the fire while snow hissed against her face. Who was she trying to save, and what secret had set this night in motion? If you enjoy heartfelt Western stories, share where you're watching from and come along for the journey. The wind struck Ada Cross sideways as she reached the Broken Horn Gate. Frozen rain rattled against the cedar posts and slipped beneath the collar of her thin brown dress. She held the gate with both hands until the dizziness passed. The road behind her had already vanished beneath sleet, leaving only a pale scar across the Colorado foothills. She had walked 3 days from Cannon City. One shoe had split across the toe. A strip torn from her petticoat held the other sole in place. Beneath her arm was a cloth bundle containing a broken comb, a needle wrapped in paper, clean underclothing, and a square cut from her mother's old flour sack. The biscuit recipe was not written down. Ada carried it where cold and rain could not reach it. Beyond the muddy yard stood a long timber house with 2 chimneys, though smoke rose from only one. The barn leaned into the wind. A loose length of chain knocked against the corral fence with a hollow, lonely sound. Ada crossed the yard and knocked. The door opened only halfway. The man behind it was tall and broad through the shoulders, with rain darkening his coat and a leather glove tucked beneath one arm. His beard was trimmed close, but weariness had gone untended around his eyes. "Yes? I'm looking for work." His gaze moved over her wet dress, broken shoes, and empty hands. "What kind? Cleaning, laundry, mending? I can haul water and tend a stove. I know some about chickens and milk cows. We don't keep either. I can learn whatever else you need." His jaw tightened. "I don't need another mouth before winter." The door began to close. Ada pressed her numb palm against the wood. "I can bake biscuits." The door stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the chain striking the corral fence. The man looked toward the dark passage behind him, then back at Ada. "Our cook left a month ago." "I won't. You don't know the place. I know the weather behind me." Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, perhaps recognition. He opened the door. The kitchen was colder than the yard. Ash covered the hearthstones. Grease blackened the iron pans, and one flour bin stood partly open near a wall speckled with damp. Sour milk rested in a crock beside a tin of baking soda. The man set a cast iron pan on the table. "One pan. If they're fit to eat, you can stay tonight." Ada removed her wet shawl and laid it across a chair. Her hands trembled until she pushed them into the flour. Then they remembered. She scraped away the spoiled layer and checked what remained for insects. She smelled the milk, measured soda against her palm, and cut cold lard into the flour with 2 knives. The room filled with the scrape of metal, the soft fold of dough, and the low crackle of the fire she coaxed back to life. The man watched from the doorway. At first, his eyes followed every movement, as though waiting for a mistake. Then his shoulders lowered by half an inch. Ada shaped the biscuits and placed them close together in the pan, just as her mother had taught her, close enough to help one another rise. When she opened the oven, warm air touched her face. The biscuits had lifted high, their tops golden, and split into tender layers. She placed one on a cracked white plate. The man took it. Steam curled between his fingers when he broke it open. He tasted it without speaking. Ada waited. He ate the rest, then reached for another. Still, he said nothing. Her fingers twisted in the damp skirt at her hip. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows. She wondered how far she might walk before her legs failed. At last, he pointed toward the narrow pantry door. "There's a cot behind the flour sacks." Ada released a breath she had been holding since Cannon City. "What time do the men eat?" 6. He turned away, then stopped beneath the doorway. Emmett Shaw. It was the first thing he had offered that was not a test or an order. Ada Cross. The pantry was hardly wider than the cot. Flour sacks rose against one wall, and a shelf of empty jars hung above her head. But the roof did not leak. Ada ate one biscuit in the darkness and wrapped half of another in cloth for morning. Through the thin wall, she heard Emmett pacing beside the cold hearth. Neither of them slept much. Before dawn, Ada rose and lit the stove. She made coffee, fried salt pork, thickened gravy, and baked another pan of biscuits. The ranch hands entered stamping snow from their boots. Their talk stopped when she placed the basket on the table. Nathan Miller broke open the first biscuit. He tasted it, looked toward Emmett, and sat down instead of carrying his plate back to the bunkhouse. An older hand called Jebediah watched Ada over the rim of his coffee cup. Emmett ate without praise. When another man reached for the final biscuit, however, Emmett's hand got there first. After breakfast, he stood beside the kitchen door. "You can stay for now." No wage was named. No promise was written. The pantry cot remained surrounded by flour sacks, and her future rested on the next meal. Still, when the wind shook the windows, Ada rolled up her sleeves and began scrubbing the blackened stove. That afternoon, wagon bells sounded beyond the gate. A black freighter climbed down from the seat, brushed sleet from his shoulders, and stared when he saw Ada carrying lamp oil into the house. Ada Cross? She recognized Isaiah Freeman from Cannon City. His gaze moved from her apron to the ranch house, then settled on her face. "Did Shaw hire you, Miss Cross? Or did he merely let you stay?" Ada shifted the lamp oil tin against her hip. Isaiah Freeman stood beside his freight wagon, with sleet shining on the shoulders of his canvas coat. Two mules steamed in the cold behind him. He had always spoken plainly in Cannon City, and distance had not softened him. "He said I could stay. That was not my question." Ada glanced toward the kitchen window. Emmett's shadow moved behind the glass. Isaiah lowered his voice. "What wage did he name?" "None." The word sat heavy in her throat. "He gave me a dry place," she said. "Food. So do most ranches for hired men." Ada looked down at the mud darkening the hem of her dress. Isaiah did not press further. He lifted a crate of coffee from the wagon and said, "A locked door keeps weather out. A written agreement keeps a person from becoming weather herself." By the time the wagon bells faded along the Pine Hollow Road, Ada could no longer look at the pantry cot without seeing how easily it might be taken away. Still, she worked. Days became weeks. The kitchen changed first. Grease came off the pans. Damp flour sacks were moved onto boards. Salt pork was wrapped properly, coffee measured, bacon drippings sealed in crocks. Ida marked dates in charcoal along the pantry shelves and turned stale bread into pudding instead of throwing it to the dogs. Then the men changed. They washed before supper. They lingered over coffee. Nathan Miller repaired the loose rung of Ada's chair without being asked. Another hand began splitting extra kindling for the stove. Even Jebediah, who watched her with the caution of an old range horse, started arriving before the biscuits left the oven. One evening, Nathan laid a fresh contract before Emmett. "I'll stay through calving." Two others followed. Emmett looked toward the kitchen, where Ada was rolling dough beneath the lamplight. "Good," he said. But that, instead of taking the ranch ledger into his office, he sat at the kitchen table. He claimed the office stove smoked. Ada had cleaned that stovepipe herself and knew better. He worked while she washed bowls. She learned that he drank coffee black and rubbed the scar in his palm when figures troubled him. He learned that she hummed under her breath while kneading, though she always stopped when she noticed him listening. The question of wages remained between them. Ada waited until the men had gone to the bunkhouse. Then she placed her pantry inventory beside Emmett's ledger. "What do I earn?" His pencil stopped. "You have a bed and meals. The hands have those too. His eyes lifted. They also have wages written in that book. The kitchen grew very still. I did not take you in to be accused of cheating you. Ada kept both palms flat against the table so he would not see them tremble. Then make it honest. Emmett's jaw tightened. For a moment, she expected the door to open and the sleet to be waiting beyond it. Instead, he looked toward the pantry. Perhaps he remembered her first night behind the flour sacks. What would you call fair? Ada named a cook's monthly wage she had heard offered in Cannon City. Her voice nearly failed on the amount, but she did not lower it. Emmett considered, then nodded. Room and board besides. Beginning the day I baked the first pan. A flicker passed across his face. Agreed. He opened the ledger and wrote slowly. Ada Cross. Kitchen, provisions, laundry, household accounts. He signed beneath it and turned the book toward her. Ada took the pencil. Her name appeared steady beside his. Emmett studied the letters. You write well. My mother saw to it. He closed the ledger with unusual care. The next morning, Ada found a newly sharpened pencil beside her mixing bowl. No note, no explanation. Later that week, she mended a tear across Emmett's winter coat. When he slipped it on, his fingers found the heavier stitching she had placed inside the shoulders. You reinforced it. That is where you wear them through. His gaze stayed on her longer than the words required. Ada looked away first. 2 days later, a cast-iron lid slipped and burned her palm. Emmett crossed the kitchen so quickly, his chair struck the floor behind him. He caught her wrist and held her hand beneath cold pump water. You should have called. You hired me to manage the kitchen. I did not hire you to ruin your hand. His voice was sharp, but his thumb rested lightly beside the burn. Neither moved for several breaths. That evening, Ada swept the main room and stopped beside the empty chair near the hearth. She had cleaned around it for weeks without shifting it. Emmett watched from the doorway. Why leave the dust beneath that one? I did not know whether it was furniture or memory. His face closed at the mention of what had not been named. Then he crossed the room, moved the chair himself, and waited while she swept beneath it. It was Margaret's, he said. Ada nodded. When this floor was clean, Emmett returned the chair to the exact place it had stood. She asked nothing more. 3 mornings later, riders came through the broken horn gate. Silas Vane entered the house carrying a folded note and the confidence of a man who expected to be obeyed. He laid the paper beside Emmett's coffee cup. The note bore the signature of Emmett's father. Payment was due before the first deep snow. If unpaid, Silas claimed the right to Broken Horn's lower winter pasture. Without that sheltered grass, the cattle would have nowhere to feed once the mountain drifts came. Emmett read the paper twice. This was settled years ago. Then produced the receipt. Silas's gaze traveled over the warm kitchen, the orderly shelves, and the men eating at the table. It stopped on Ada. So this is Shaw's colored cook. Emmett's chair scraped hard against the floor. Her name is Miss Cross. Silas smiled without warmth. Outside, before mounting, he waited until Ada carried an empty crate toward the wagon. I will pay twice what Shaw does, he said. You may find my ranch standing when this one is gone. Ada set the crate down. I am not looking for another position. Loyalty does not put grass beneath cattle. No, work does. Silas's smile thinned. When he rode away, Ada found Emmett standing beneath the porch roof. He had heard. Thank you, he said. I did not refuse for you alone. Her eyes went to the kitchen window, where Nathan was passing the biscuit basket to Jebediah. I have work unfinished. That night, Emmett unfolded the debt note beneath the lamp. Snow tapped softly against the glass. He traced the final line with one finger, then looked toward Ada. If this stands, he said, We lose the lower pasture in 30 days. Ada looked at the note, then at the black window beyond Emmett's shoulder. Snow moved across the glass in thin white streaks. Then we use every day. By morning, Broken Horn was working against the weather. Nathan and the younger hands patched shingles before the roof froze solid. Jebediah checked the south fence twice, muttering that a weak post could cost 10 head in one bad night. Emmett rode the lower range with the debt paper folded inside his coat, searching his father's old files whenever darkness forced him indoors. Ada prepared the house as carefully as the men prepared the cattle. She sealed jars with wax, dried onions over the stove, stitched wool along the kitchen windows, counted candles, and packed emergency biscuits into 2 tin boxes. When one of the hands came down with fever, she moved his bedding away from the others and kept broth warm until his shaking eased. Emmett began asking her opinion before making household decisions. He also began leaving small things where she would find them. A smooth river stone appeared beside her mixing bowl after she mentioned needing a pastry weight. A better lamp wick rested on the pantry shelf. One cold morning, she found a pair of wool stockings folded beside her shoes. She never asked who placed them there. A week later, she laid a gray scarf beside Emmett's gloves. He wore it that same day. Their names changed in private. He no longer called her Miss Cross when the room was empty. She only called him Emmett when no one else could hear. Still, Ada kept part of each wage inside a flour tin beneath her cot. The more Broken Horn felt like home, the more frightened she became of trusting it. Her mother had once told her that useful women were often praised until the work was done. Ada remembered those words whenever Emmett watched her knead dough across the kitchen. One morning, they drove to Pine Hollow for winter supplies. The mountain road was rutted with frozen mud, and the wagon wheels groaned where ice filled the tracks. At the general store, the merchant spoke only to Emmett, while Ada inspected the flour. "This lot came up from Pueblo," the man said. "Best I've got." Ada pressed 2 fingers against a sack and felt dampness near the seam. "This one has been stored against a wall." The merchant ignored her. Emmett stepped back from the counter. "She manages my provisions. Speak to her." Ada rejected 3 sacks, bargained down a crate of bruised apples, and found a mistake in the written account. The merchant recalculated with a red face. On the ride home, Emmett glanced at her over the reins. "You handled him better than the last 3 cooks." Ada tucked the receipt into her coat. "Was that meant as praise?" A small smile moved beneath his beard. "Best I've managed in years." Her laugh surprised them both. It stayed between them until the wind changed. The storm came hard before they reached Broken Horn. By nightfall, sleet hammered the roof, and the ranch hands had taken shelter in the bunkhouse. Emmett returned from checking the stock with ice caught in his hair and water running from his coat. Ada placed a towel on the table without turning from the dough. A loose shutter struck the wall again and again. Emmett went back into the storm to secure it. When he returned, he stood in the same doorway where he had watched her first pan of biscuits. "Nathan signed through spring," he said. "The others too. Good cattle and fair wages will hold men. It is more than that." Ada's hands slowed. Emmett looked around the kitchen. The shelves were clean. Bread rose beneath a cloth. His repaired coat hung near the stove. They stayed because this stopped feeling like a place men only survived. The wind pressed against the house. After a long silence, he said, "When Margaret died, I worked until I could not think. I kept making the ranch bigger because everything else had gone empty." Ada did not move. "Then you came here," he continued, "with broken shoes and 1 biscuit recipe, and somehow the house remembered what it was." He stepped closer, but not too close. "You belong at Broken Horn, Ada." Her fingers became still in the dough. "As what?" Emmett's breath caught. The answer was in his face, but years of silence stood between it and his mouth. Ada waited. He said nothing. She covered the bowl with a clean cloth. Bread will be ready by morning. The next day, Isaiah arrived with mail. One letter came from a widow who owned a Denver boarding house. She needed a head cook, offered regular wages, and promised a private room with a lock. Ada read the letter in the pantry. Then she read it again. Denver meant certainty. No wondering what a long look meant. No mistaking gratitude for love. She wrote that she might accept after Broken Horn's winter stores were secured and tucked the reply into her sewing box. Jebediah saw the change in her before anyone else. While she hung laundry behind the house, he told her a woman who arrived with nothing should not expect to become mistress of a ranch. Ada clipped a sheet to the line. Is Broken Horn wealthy now? His mouth tightened. Emmett is lonely. A lonely man can mistake dependence for affection. The clothespin snapped between Ada's fingers. Behind them, a porch board creaked. Emmett came down the steps. You will speak to her with respect. Jebediah looked away. Or you can collect your wages and leave. Ada turned sharply. No. Emmett stared at her. She faced Jebediah. Did the men stay after I came? Are the supplies better kept? Have I taken $1 not written in the ledger? Jebediah said nothing. Then do not call honest work ambition simply because it belongs to me. He walked toward the bunkhouse without apology. Ada looked at Emmett. I will not live behind your authority like a fence. His anger faded. Then tell me how to stand beside you. Before she could answer, cattle began bawling from the lower pasture. The sound carried through the cold before dawn. A fence section had been cut, and part of the herd had wandered toward an iced ravine. Emmett and the hands rode out in darkness. Ada went to prepare coffee and food. In the storehouse, she found 3 flour sacks sliced open. White flour covered the floorboards. Something dark lay near the torn cloth. Ada picked it up. A brass button stamped with a curling pattern she had seen on the coat of one of Silas Vane's riders. Outside, Emmett shouted that the fence had been cut with a tool. Ada closed her hand around the button. By sunrise, the flour had been swept into a useless gray pile, and Emmett had counted the damage twice. 3 sacks were ruined. 2 steers had gone lame near the ravine. 1 section of fence would need fresh posts before the next storm. Silas Vane's debt deadline was now less than 3 weeks away. Emmett stood over the ledger with both palms braced against the table. We let 2 men go, cut wages until spring. Ada set the small flour tin beside his hand. No. His eyes lifted. We cannot feed men we cannot pay. We cannot guard cattle with fewer hands. She opened the tin. Inside lay nearly every dollar she had saved since her name first entered the ledger. Emmett's face hardened. That is yours. It is earned money. Exactly. Ada pushed it toward him. You told me I belong here. Belonging cannot mean I eat beside the fire and stand outside every risk. They argued until the lamp burned low. At last, Ada drew the ledger closer. Record it as an investment, not a gift. Broken Horn repays me after the spring sale. Emmett stared at her for a long moment, then wrote the amount. A cross, household and provision interest. Ada placed 1 finger beneath the line. Not household. He looked at her. Broken Horn. Emmett scratched out the words and wrote again. A cross, Broken Horn Ranch interest. Their hands rested near each other on the page. Neither moved first. The next day, they carried the brass button to Pine Hollow. The deputy turned it beneath the window light, then shook his head. 1 button proves it came off the coat, not who cut a fence. Emmett's jaw tightened. He started toward the door, but Ada caught his sleeve. Silas expects anger. He nearly drove cattle into a ravine, and if you ride onto his land with a gun, he will make you the criminal. Emmett looked down at her hand on his coat. After a moment, he stopped. Before the next storm, Ada used the last good flour for 7 biscuits, one for each person at Broken Horn. When the basket reached her, it was empty. Emmett looked at her bare plate, broke his biscuit in half, and placed one piece before her. No one spoke. Jebediah watched from across the table. The fire came after midnight. The ranch dog began barking first. Then Nathan shouted from the yard. Orange light rolled above the lower barn. Men burst from the bunkhouse, pulling on coats. Horses slammed against their stalls. Burning straw lifted into the wind and scattered across the snow. Ada ran into the kitchen. "Wet the blankets," she ordered. "Carry water to the house roof. Clear the pantry wall." She filled basins, tore linen into strips, and banked the stove so the kitchen would not catch from within. Outside, the barn groaned. A beam fell near the entrance. Through the smoke, Ada saw a boot beneath part of a broken stall. Jebediah. She wrapped a wet blanket over her head and went low beneath the smoke. Heat pressed against her face. "Leave me," Jebediah coughed. Ada wedged an iron bar beneath the timber. "Nathan!" He came running, and together they lifted enough for Jebediah to crawl free. The roof collapsed behind them. Jebediah clutched Ada's sleeve, breathing hard, but no apology came. Then Emmett's horse returned alone. The empty saddle struck Ada harder than the fire. Nathan pointed toward the lower pasture. He went after the cattle near the creek. The wind had shifted. Smoke covered the fence line. Ada saddled another horse. Nathan caught the bridle. "You cannot see the road. I know the fence." She tied a rope behind the saddle, took a blanket, a shielded lantern, and 2 biscuits wrapped in cloth. Snow began falling through the smoke. It turned black when it touched the ground. Ada followed the fence posts one by one until she reached the frozen creek. There, beneath a fallen gatepost, she saw Emmett. His horse had thrown him. One leg was pinned. "Ada, go back!" She dropped to her knees and dug packed snow away with both hands. "The fire is moving this way." "You gave me one chance at your stove," she said. "Yum, you do not get to decide, mine ends here." She fastened the rope around the post and used the horse to pull. The timber shifted. Emmett dragged his leg free and nearly fell. Ada helped him into the saddle, then walked beside the horse through the snow, one hand gripping his boot to keep him steady. At dawn, the ranch hands saw them emerge from the smoke. Emmett bent over the saddle. Ada's dress was blackened. One sleeve burned through at the cuff. Jebediah sat beneath a blanket near the porch. No one questioned whether she belonged after that. The barn was lost. Much of the hay was gone. Emmett's ribs were cracked, and his legs swelled badly. For days, the ranch house fell quiet. Ada changed his bandages, warmed broth, recorded his fever, and kept the accounts moving through Nathan. Emmett tried to thank her. "You would have done the same for anyone here," she said. Both knew that was not true. Isaiah arrived with replacement flour on the 4th day. While Emmett rested in the adjoining room, Isaiah asked Ada whether she still intended to take the Denver position. Emmett heard him. After Isaiah left, he faced her from the doorway, one hand gripping the frame. "You were planning to leave." "I plan to finish the winter stores first. The ranch cannot survive without you." Ada became very still. The ranch, the men, the kitchen. She looked straight at him. "You name every reason except me." Silence filled the room. "I will not spend my life wondering whether your affection lasts only while the bread rises." "Ada." "You should rest, Mr. Shaw." The formality wounded him more than anger. That night, neither slept. Emmett spread Silas's note beside the old ranch ledger. Ada brought the supply records to the table. She studied the date. This was filed on a Sunday. Emmett looked closer. The Pine Hollow office is never open Sundays. The handwriting did not match his father's other entries. Isaiah had hauled Shaw cattle during that same year. Jebediah had been there. The next morning, Ada changed the bandage on the old ranch hand's leg. He stared at the floorboards. Emmett's father paid that debt with 20 head. Ada's hands stopped. Silas said it covered only interest. I believed him. Jebediah swallowed. There is more. He looked toward the burned barn through the window. I saw a rider before the flames rose. Gray horse, coat missing one brass button. Ada waited. Jebediah gripped the blanket. I know that horse. His voice dropped. It belongs to Silas Vane. Jebediah's words settled over the room. By noon, Ada had the kitchen table covered with papers. The old debt note lay beside Emmett's father's ledger, Isaiah's freight book, Ada's supply records, and the brass button wrapped in cloth. One date did not match an open office day. One signature leaned where the true hand stood straight. Isaiah's book recorded 20 Shaw cattle delivered to Silas during the disputed month. Jebediah remembered hearing Silas declare the matter settled. Ada's inventory showed the flour had been cut days before the fire, proving the damage had not begun with a stray spark. Emmett watched her fit the pieces together. You saw all this while keeping the ranch fed. Ada did not look up. The figures were already speaking. Someone had to listen. They left for Pine Hollow the next morning. The wagon rolled slowly over the frozen mountain road. Emmett's injured leg rested beneath a wool blanket. Ada sat beside him with the ledger held against her coat. Nathan rode ahead, while Isaiah and Jebediah followed behind. Neither Ada nor Emmett spoke of Denver. At the territorial office, Silas Vane was already waiting with a lawyer and the Pine Hollow deputy. He smiled when Emmett entered. The smile faded when Ada placed the ledger on the clerk's desk. Silas looked at her. This is cattle business. My money is in Broken Horn, Ada said. That makes it my business. The clerk examined their note. Ada showed him the Sunday date, then the handwriting. Isaiah opened his freight book and pointed to the cattle entry, complete with brands and delivery location. Jebediah removed his hat. I saw those cattle handed over. I heard Silas say the debt was finished. Silas's lawyer shifted uneasily. Silas turned on Jebediah. You owe your life to that woman. You would say anything she asked. Jebediah leaned on his cane and faced him. She saved my life because she had more honor than I showed her. That does not change what I saw. The office door opened. Silas's foreman stood there, one hand still on the latch. Ada looked at his coat. One brass button was missing. Nathan moved between him and the street. The deputy took the button from Ada, fitted it against the remaining row, and said, You had better start talking. The foreman's face emptied of color. I cut the fence, he said. Vane ordered that. The flour, too. Silas stepped toward him. The deputy blocked the way. And the barn? The foreman swallowed. He said scare them. Make Shaw desperate enough to surrender the pasture. Silas shouted that the man was lying, but the room had already turned away from him. By sundown, the debt claim was suspended, the note held as evidence, and Silas was taken into custody pending a territorial hearing. His foreman went with him. Broken Horn kept the lower pasture. The ranch was saved. Yet on the ride home, Ada felt no victory. The legal papers proved where her money stood. They did not prove where her heart could safely rest. 3 days later, she packed her small bundle. The comb still had 2 missing teeth. The needle was still wrapped in paper. Her mother's flour sack cloth was folded beneath the Denver letter. She left her apron on the kitchen peg and carried the bundle toward the gate before sunrise. Snow had begun melting along the fence line. Water dripped from the cedar posts. Somewhere near the creek, the first meadowlark called into the pale morning. Emmett waited beside the gate. He wore the gray scarf she had made him. Ada stopped. You should not be standing on that leg. I have stood on worse. She tightened her grip on the bundle. The ranch is safe now. Yes. You have the pasture. The men stayed. Isaiah found another flour supplier. Yes. She waited. Emmett looked toward the road, then back at her. The first day you came here, I gave you 1 pan and 1 night. Ada said nothing. I thought I was offering mercy. His voice roughened. The truth is, you brought more through that door than I had left in the whole house. Her eyes lowered. He stepped closer, slowly enough that she could step away. I was wrong when I said the ranch could not survive without you. Ada's face tightened. Emmett continued. The ranch might survive. I would too, most likely. The wind moved lightly through the bare cottonwoods. But surviving is not what I am asking for anymore. He took a folded document from inside his coat. It was a partnership agreement prepared by the Pine Hollow clerk. Half of Broken Horn's household interest, a share in spring cattle profits, and Ada's investment were written clearly beneath both names. Ada read it once. Then she looked at him. This is not a marriage proposal. No. Emmett drew a small gold ring from his pocket. It was plain, without ornament. This is... Her breath caught. He did not kneel. The snow was wet, and he knew she did not need a performance. I love the way you account for flour. I love that you leave the best biscuit for the last man at the table. I love that you told me when I was wrong and stayed long enough to see whether I could become better. Ada's eyes filled, but she did not look away. I love you when the stove is cold, he said. I love you when the ranch is failing. I love you when you are angry with me. His hand closed around the ring. And if you leave, your share remains yours. You owe me no answer because of a roof, a wage, or a winter fire. That was what made her believe him. Not the ring, not the ranch, the freedom to refuse. Ada looked beyond him at the house, where smoke rose steadily from both chimneys now. Nathan stood near the barn pretending to inspect a harness. Jebediah watched from the porch with his hat in both hands. She set her bundle on the gatepost. I will not sleep in the pantry. Emmett's mouth trembled toward a smile. You will have any room you choose. My name stays in the ledger. It goes on the deed. And when we disagree, you will tell me. And you will listen. I am learning. Ada held out her hand. Emmett slipped the ring onto her finger. Spring came slowly to Broken Horn. The burned barn was rebuilt with fresh pine. New grass pushed through the blackened ground. At the small Pine Hollow church, Isaiah stood beside Nathan, and Jebediah carried Ada's mother's flour cloth folded neatly in his coat pocket. After the vows, Ada returned to the ranch kitchen and baked the first biscuits of spring. The table was crowded. Margaret's chair still stood beside the hearth, but it no longer guarded an empty room. Ada had placed a vase of early wildflowers on the small stand beside it. Emmett lifted the biscuit basket and looked at his wife. If you can bake biscuits, you can stay. Ada took one, broke it open, and watched the steam rise between them. I stayed because I chose you. Outside, the Broken Horn gate stood open to the road. For months, it had watched hunger arrive, storms gather, old wounds reopen, and two guarded hearts learn that trust is never built in a single moment. It is built in quiet mornings, shared coffee, repaired coats, honest words, and the choice to stay when walking away would be easier. If you had stood where Ada once stood, with worn shoes, tired hands, and only one skill the world seemed willing to notice, would you have knocked on that door? And if you had stood where Emmett stood, carrying grief that had settled into every room of your home, would you have found the courage to open it again? Perhaps that is why this story lingers long after the last page. Love was never waiting for them at the end of the trail. They made it, one act of patience at a time. They discovered that healing does not erase the past. It teaches us how to carry it beside hope without letting it become the whole journey. If this story found a place in your heart, I'd truly love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you the longest, or what you would have done if you had been standing at the Broken Horn Gate that cold autumn afternoon. And if stories of quiet courage, enduring love, frontier faith, and second chances speak to something deep inside you, I hope you'll join me again. There are many more unforgettable trails ahead, and I'd be honored to share the next one with you.